everyone, so I got my melody popsicle. It's really hot today, so I'm gonna eat, and I'm hungry, so I'm gonna eat this as a snack. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. So recently, I unironically watched My Melody and Chromie. Oh, it's stuck. Okay. Why is it like this? Okay, so I hope you don't mind me eating this, but I'm gonna talk about why I'm so happy that Squid Game is finally over and we can leave it in the past. Out of all the things that Korea has to offer, like, I think I hate Squid Game the most, and maybe this is because I'm a teacher and I taught elementary school. This is really good. Oh, this has a little bit of a yogurt flavor, so I think it's like yogurt popsicle. Ah, it's strawberry yogurt. Yep, that's it. I can't stand Squid Game because I'm a teacher, and maybe if I wasn't a teacher, especially like during the pandemic was happening when the first one came out, if I wasn't just like trapped as a teacher when the first Squid Game came out, like, I might feel differently. If I lived in America, I might feel differently. But there's so many things about Squid Game that I personally just couldn't get past, like some of the brutality. I find that Korean media just like has like lingering scenes of blood in a way that well, it won't even show a knife like American media. Like, it will blur out weapons, but it has like lingering like grossness with the blood sometimes that I just can't deal with. So Squid Game was not my cup of tea, or should I say cup of tteokbokki. Yes, because of the brutality. So personally, I only watched an episode and a half, and I stopped watching the second that the guy who was the loan shark gang member put like the main character's blood in his mouth. Like, that grossed me out. And I can like put up with a lot because I watch Grey's Anatomy. Like medical drama doesn't bother me. It's like the grossness of that. And I watched the first 3 Twilight movies when I was growing up, so yeah. But to set the scene, this was COVID. Me and other native teachers, we are immigrants. We are here on a working visa to do a job. Korea has a social hierarchy, and immigrants go to the bottom of the hierarchy. No matter how pretty people think you are, there's always a reason they're gonna put immigrants at the bottom. If you're pretty and white, they think you're a schmex worker. If they think you look too young, then they think you don't have authority to be a teacher and you have like the age thing, even if you're not that young. If you are from South Africa, they'll be really picky that if your grammar is not American style. If you're black, they'll be really picky about that. If you have darker skin tone, they'll be picky about that. They have something to put every foreigner on the bottom of the pyramid, no matter how attractive that foreigner is. We're all on the bottom of the pyramid. And to be honest, teachers aren't even on the bottom of the bottom, because the people who work physical jobs, like the really short-term contracts, have it even worse. So generally speaking, I'm only talking about E2 visa, native teachers, and we have it really tough with our visa, and our job is already like tough. And the place where I was working, I learned kind of after I started working there, was a very wealthy neighborhood. Like, one side of the street had an apartment complex with a Haagen-Dazs in it, and a bunch of other expensive like food places. And on the other side, there was one of the most expensive, it's called like a Zai apartment. So I think it's a Zai apartment. It's one of the most expensive apartment complexes, and they have like playgrounds there that just look fancy, like compared to any of the other apartments that I've walked past. And I used to walk past that every day because it's the famous one next to Sapyeong Station in Socho, which is in Gangnam, which is also like the expensive place. And those apartments like cost more, for example, than like the same apartment in Shinlim. That's like kind of like a less nice place. I think it's even more expensive than, what's another nice place? Like, I think those apartments are even more expensive than the Han Riverview apartments. And Han Riverview apartments are also expensive. So my students there were not just wealthy, because a lot of my students have been pretty wealthy, but they were like upper class. But they were not classy upper class. Like, they're not like the old money kind of people. They're just like upper class, okay? And so they're higher in the hierarchy. My Korean co-teacher was talking about how they said their dads drives like Mercedes Benz, although a lot of people are car poor and house poor in Korea. But I don't think the parents, these classes that had the problems, I don't think the parents moved to Gangnam for their kids' education, because those classes like also had my worst students, and my worst students were the worst culprits in this. Not to mention some of the most expensive schools in Seoul, some of the most expensive kindergartens also were the culprits of this behavior that I'm about to talk about. So, Squid Game came out. There was some buzz around it. The buzz in Korea was, I think, even bigger than the buzz in America. I think it was kind of like a silly meme in America. I don't think it should be memeified because it's a pretty serious situation. Like, there's people in so much debt that they're like gonna have to sell their organs. People with like post-traumatic stress disorder, like addictions and things like that. Again, I didn't watch the whole thing, and I was told that it's a lot about like the wealth disparity and like issues that people have. And also, I think that if you watch it out of context, and especially if you watch a memeified version of it, you're not gonna understand it. It's not like the Hunger Games, which was very serious throughout. And you know, I think the people always compare it to the Hunger Games because they have the same name, but Hunger Games is very different. They created like, they did a little bit more world building in the Hunger Games. So I think, to be honest, I'm a Hunger Games girl. I didn't like Squid Game. I thought a lot of people said Squid Game was a ripoff. I mean, you know, that battle royale idea has been done a lot of times before, so I don't think it matters that that's the idea. I just think this memeified version and people who are too young to be watching it is like a big problem. So basically, like the week after it came out, I went in and we had 5-minute breaks in between our class, and my students from kindergarten ranging to about 3rd and 4th grade, they are suddenly playing red light, green light, which they probably wouldn't have been doing before because it's a game for babies by like their own words. And suddenly they're playing this game and pretending to pew pew each other, and they're laughing like crazy. They think it's hilarious. So, as someone with American level student loan debt, and I had to move to Korea during the pandemic to like keep up with the debt, like it just didn't sit right with me there. And as someone who, as a teacher, I could never make enough to live in the apartments that my students were living in, even with like several roommates. I don't think we could ever get a spot there. Also, like as a foreigner, I'd be prohibited from buying it probably anyway. But like, I just feel like that didn't sit right with me because they're like laughing about that kind of thing, and they're never gonna know that struggle a day in their life. Because these students also, their parents were so wealthy, like they had to repeat every grade that we had in the Hagwon, and the parents like didn't care. Every time they didn't improve, they just leveled up because we don't repeat kids more than once. But my students' lack of understanding about the situation really bothered me, because the parents were like either letting them watch, I think they were watching memeified clips off of YouTube, completely taking the TV show out of context, which is why they thought it was so funny. And a lot of people memeified it. And yeah, and also that year, a lot of Korean people dressed up like that for Halloween. Like, also my students did. And the kids wearing the pink guard outfits really expected a lot of attention. Like, they're the most attention-seeking students, too. So yeah, Halloween was, like, annoying that year because they wouldn't, like, shut up about Squid Game. And it really bothered me because the parents, like, had every opportunity to explain the complex themes of Squid Game just a little bit to the kids. I know they won't really understand it. And again, when I told this to somebody who was not a teacher, like how my kids were like reenacting Squid Games, they're like, oh, they're just kids, they'll get embarrassed about it when they're older. But I'm not sure that they will. If their parents like don't explain to them the situation when they're young. Like, they weren't too young to learn. I mean, if they're young enough to watch it, they're young enough to learn about wealth disparity and debt and things like that, instead of thinking that it's just some giant like lottery game that people are doing for fun. And like I said, these kids also were not particularly mature for their age, so definitely not like old enough to even be watching or understanding this. Like, their parents need to watch their screen time better. And my co-teacher said that they were just watching like the memeified clips on YouTube, not the whole thing anyway. But again, their parents like didn't explain any of the themes to them, so they really just only understood a memeified version, and they didn't understand where they fit in the storyline, because while they're not exactly like the wealthiest characters in the storyline, like living in those apartments that they were living in, they're nowhere near the other characters. I guess they could someday find themselves being like the businessman who made like the wrong investments, but I also didn't love his character either. I heard though from like other people, like there were really bad translations, so also it made their English worse, but those kids were not doing well. Like I said, they were repeating like every grade, and it was so bad. Like, their work was so bad. And all my students who were like older and doing well did not even mention Squid Game to me once. And they told me that they, for the most part, they hadn't watched it, which I thought was like really ironic. But yeah, so all of my like good students like hadn't been watching it anyway. Probably because their parents had some like level of involvement in their life. But it made my unruly classes even more unruly and even more rude and annoying, basically. So yeah, I didn't like Squid Game, and I didn't like that my students didn't understand where they fit into the picture, because them playing the game and laughing while like other people are working hard, and a lot of myself and my coworkers have like student debt, and we come from like more working class or like middle class backgrounds, it was like not a good vibe. And my other teacher friends agree. Like, not everybody who wasn't a teacher agrees. Some people think, oh, they're kids, like they'll be embarrassed, like I said. But all of my teacher friends agreed with me, and at some of their kindergartens is especially worse with younger kids. Like I said, from my experience with the older kids and the better behaved kids, there was like not a problem with that. They never even mentioned it to me because they knew it was not an appropriate topic for school. They knew they might get in trouble or even yelled at. But with my friends who worked in the kindergarten, they had to send out flyers like telling people like, don't let your kids play the Squid Game or copy Squid Game in the school, or like talk to your kids or whatever, because like the students were bringing those paper squares and like slapping each other. But the thing about the kindergartners is they always bring in those squares. They always want to show them to you when they learn how to make them. It was just the slapping started after watching Squid Game memes. And so obviously that's like a huge problem that the kindergartners were doing that, and they're way too young, because like at that age kids are still mimicking like the things that they see. and the Squid Game's nowhere near appropriate, and it could be like really scary for some kids, like too scary so that they like can't sleep or like causes them emotional trauma. So it was so stressful teaching during that time, and also it felt very dehumanizing to teach during that time when the kids are laughing at people with insurmountable amounts of debt because my student loans were the highest they had ever been, and because of inflation my interest rates had actually increased. So my student loans were looking like really bad at the time, and even on my teacher's salary, like paying them back is like not an easy task. So I did not appreciate that the parents just sent their kids out into the world like that to interact with people that way. But I'm also not surprised because the same kids involved also had parents who would complain the most or like cause the most problem. So again, like not the most socially apt like parents either. I also think Squid Game did a really bad job representing certain minority groups or like certain afflictions that people have. So I'm just really glad it's over because I just don't have to stress about my students watching that anymore, and so much of the hype has died down, and the Seoul, particularly Seoul government, has tried to put up pop-ups since the last season came out. They tried to do like pop-ups and parades, but I don't think people were really into it. Again, I think that's really messed up as well. Like they're celebrating the worst part of their society because Squid Game is supposed to be calling out Korean society for the way it like treats people. Maybe it didn't like it also has the pacing of like K-dramas, which can be really slow, which means sometimes people skip through context or like they skip through parts that give context because it can be so slow paced. And I think like I don't know if like everybody just like missed the mark on that, but I really feel like the city like rolling around the giant doll for the parade and like blocking off streets to celebrate the last season of Squid Game was just like kind of gross. Especially like when you see the news, like people are always dying from like heat stroke and hypothermia in the winter and the summer. So it's not like there's no homeless people here. It's not like there's no desperate people. And I know somebody who visited the horse racing place who said it was like the sleaziest place they'd ever been. So there are people with gambling addictions in Korea. And there are people with a lot of problems in Korea. Like orphans also don't get any help. There's like a lot of problems. So to be like kind of celebrating the social economic disparity between people is like a little bit strange to me. And I think like there's also amongst Koreans the idea that oh, every foreigner knows Squid Game and every foreigner likes Squid Game, so I can talk to every foreigner about Squid Game and they'll like it. And a lot of foreigners, they watched Squid Game and they were like, oh, shocking, and then they moved on. They didn't really like play into it as much, and the schools really like immediately they were like, you cannot do anything Squid Game related in school. It's bullying. It's not okay. Like we do not do physical violence in school. In America it's very serious. Yeah, immediately like flyers were sent home to most school districts saying like there is no mention of Squid Game. We are not doing Squid Game in our school. Like kids are not reenacting that. And like I said, I have family members in America, and I think the only people who are excited about Squid Game are like influencers who are getting paid by Netflix and celebrities who thought it was funny because they, like my students, didn't get the context. So all of this to say, I am so happy that Squid Game is over. I'm just, yeah, like everybody like missed the mark so hard. I never liked Squid Game, but I also want to say if you like watch Squid Game and it was entertaining to you, like that's fine. Like I don't think anybody who likes Squid Game is a bad person. I just didn't like it because as a teacher it made my life so annoying and frustrating and difficult for like several months. You guys will say the most annoying things that they copy from the show, and I like, it's so frustrating because it takes so many hours to deal with, like, there's so many hours a day of hearing these same annoying things and having to be like, hey, you shouldn't be saying that, you shouldn't be talking about that in school, like, that's not an appropriate topic, like, that kind of thing. It gets old really fast. Every time a new season of Squid Game comes out, you have the kids talking about it or reenacting it, and I'm so happy it's over. Like, other people having parade, I'm having a parade because I'm happy it's over and we don't have to deal with it in school anymore. So if you watched this far, thanks for watching my video. Please like and subscribe. Bye!